The clink of champagne glasses echoed like delicate chimes in the grand ballroom of the Larkspur Hotel. Opulence dripped from every corner, gold chandeliers, velvet drapes, and dresses that cost more than Ember Collins made in a year. But she moved swiftly, gracefully, balancing a tray of hors d'oeuvres like she was born to serve. Not that she had a choice. It was just another shift, another night, another party for the wealthy elite who barely noticed the servers in black vests and fake smiles. Ember had learned to blend into the background, to be invisible. But tonight, something shifted. The room changed the moment Sawyer Grant walked in. It wasn't just his looks, though his presence was cinematic. Tall, sharp jawline, black suit tailored to perfection, and those electric blue eyes that seemed to hold secrets no one dared ask about. It was the way conversations pause, the way women whispered behind manicured hands, the way powerful men straightened their posture when he passed. Sawyer was the untouchable kind of rich, the type of man who owned the building before they even knew it was for sale. And yet, while everyone else saw the legend, he saw her. Ember didn't notice him at first. She was too busy avoiding the drunk hedge fund manager who kept winking at her. But when she turned toward the balcony for a breath of fresh air, she met his eyes. Sawyer was already watching her. Their gaze locked. Just for a second. But it was enough. She swallowed hard and looked away, flustered. "Don't be stupid, Ember," she told herself. "He probably looks at all the help like that before forgetting their face." But 5 minutes later, while Ember was catching her breath on the terrace, she felt a presence behind her. "You got one of those for me?" She turned and froze. Sawyer Grant, in all his impossible glory, stood before her, his voice low, smooth, with just the right rasp, the kind that clung to your skin. Ember blinked, confused. "A cigarette?" she asked, almost forgetting she held one between her fingers. He nodded. "Been a hell of a week." She offered it. He leaned closer. Their fingers brushed, and something inside her sparked. The city lights painted the sky behind them. The gala continued behind the glass doors. But here on this quiet terrace, it was just Sawyer and Ember, in a silence that felt less empty and more curious. They smoked. They talked. He asked her name. She laughed, surprised that he cared. "Ember." "Like fire," he said, lips curling into a rare smile. "Fitting." "What about you?" she teased, already knowing. "Sawyer," he replied simply. She acted unimpressed. He looked amused. The minutes bled into hours, her break long forgotten, his drink untouched. They talked about everything and nothing. His love for classic jazz, her passion for books she never had time to read. He spoke about loneliness as if it were an old friend. She shared how exhausting it was to keep pretending she had it all figured out. They didn't touch, but it felt like the most intimate moment either of them had in years. Eventually the night deepened. The music dimmed. The gala winded down, and Sawyer said, "Come with me." No promise, no pressure, just a question, one that made her pulse quicken. Ember hesitated, then nodded. They left through the private exit. A sleek black car waited. No paparazzi, no entourage, just the two of them in the back seat, saying everything in silence. His penthouse was a cathedral of glass and steel, but it was the way he looked at her that made her breath hitch. They kissed. It wasn't urgent or clumsy. It was reverent, like he'd found something he didn't know he was missing. One kiss turned into many. One whisper became laughter in tangled sheets. One night became a memory neither of them would ever forget. When Ember opened her eyes to the soft glow of dawn, the other side of the bed was empty. No note, no goodbye. Just the faint scent of his cologne and the imprint of a night too beautiful to be real. Her heart ached, because deep down she knew she would never be the same. The sun spilled like liquid gold across the silky bedsheets, but to Ember Collins, the morning felt cold, too quiet, too hollow. The suite around her, modern, pristine, towering above the city, was as unfamiliar as the ache settling in her chest. Sawyer Grant was gone. She sat up slowly, the soft sheets pooling at her waist. Her hand reached for the other side of the bed, as if his warmth might still linger. But there was nothing. No note, no explanation. Just a crushed pillow and the haunting silence of what had been. For a moment, Ember wondered if she'd imagined the whole thing. The terrace, the cigarette, the conversation that stripped away her armor, the way his lips moved like he was tasting something precious when he kissed her. But her body remembered. Her soul knew better. And that was what scared her the most. Somewhere across the city, in a glass tower that kissed the sky, Sawyer stood alone, staring out at the skyline like it could offer clarity. But clarity was the one thing eluding him. "What did you do, Sawyer?" he asked himself, jaw clenched. He had promised himself long ago never to let anyone in again. Not after the way Clara had betrayed him, using his vulnerability to climb higher in society, to rip his name apart in tabloids while pretending to love him. The pain still throbbed like an old wound that refused to close. But Ember, she wasn't like Clara. She hadn't fawned over his money or his title. She hadn't asked him for anything. In fact, she looked at him like he was just a man. Not a brand, not a billionaire, not a walking deal waiting to be signed. And that terrified him more than anything. He had left that morning before she could wake up, before he could see something in her eyes that would unravel him, before he did something foolish like hope again. Still, he hadn't stopped thinking about her since. 3 days passed, then 5. Each night, he found himself replaying their conversation in his head, her laugh, her sarcasm, the way she talked about her dream of opening a bookstore cafe, even though she couldn't afford rent this month. She had a fire in her, one that made him feel something he hadn't in years. Alive. And Ember? She tried to forget. She went back to her life, back to waiting tables at cafes that paid minimum wage and catering gigs where men didn't even look her in the eye. But everything had changed. She caught herself staring out of windows at night, wondering what it meant. Why someone like him would see someone like her. She told herself it was just one night, that he was a billionaire and she was a nobody, that people like him didn't come back. But deep down, she didn't believe that. She wasn't the kind of girl who fell for fantasies. Her life was too hard, too real for fairy tales. And yet she couldn't shake the way he looked at her, like she mattered. She still hadn't told anyone, not even her roommate Jules, who would have screamed and demanded every juicy detail. Ember kept the night like a secret under her skin, raw, glowing, hers alone. But secrets had a way of clawing out from the dark. And Sawyer? He tried to throw himself back into work. Mergers, meetings, billion-dollar deals. His assistant noticed how he was always distracted now, pausing mid-sentence or losing track of conversations. When asked if everything was all right, he'd nod. But everything wasn't all right. He kept opening his phone, staring at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. He had her number, scribbled on a napkin, a spontaneous joke during their night together. But every time he tried to text, doubt crept in. What if she hates me for disappearing? What if I ruined it already? He didn't know that Ember waited, hoped for a message. Something. Anything. But morning after morning, her phone stayed silent. One night, as rain tapped against her window, Ember curled up on the couch, blanket tight around her, whispering into the silence, "Why did you leave?" And across the city, in a lonely penthouse filled with all the things money could buy, but no one to share them with, Sawyer stood in front of a mirror, whispering, "Why couldn't I stay?" Two hearts, same ache, same questions, both haunted by a night too deep to forget and too real to explain. 3 months had passed, 3 long, aching, question-filled months. For Ember Collins, life had settled back into its exhausting rhythm. Day jobs, late nights, and dreams she'd quietly tucked back into her chest like folded letters never sent. The night with Sawyer Grant had become a ghost that hovered just beyond her reach. She told herself it didn't matter anymore, that she had moved on. But her heart knew otherwise. That night had shifted something inside her, not just because it was magical or intimate, but because for once, someone saw her. So when her boss handed her a clipboard and told her she'd be staffing a luxury tech launch at one of Manhattan's elite skyscrapers, she rolled her eyes and mentally braced for another night serving champagne to egos in designer suits. She didn't expect to walk straight into the past. The ballroom was sleek, bathed in cool lights and filled with cutting-edge screens, photographers, and the hum of ambition. Ember weaved through the crowd, tray in hand, balancing flutes of expensive champagne. When the energy around her shifted, she felt it before she saw him. And then, there he was, Sawyer. Dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, he was magnetic and polished, with the same sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes that had haunted her dreams. But this time, there was something different in his expression: regret, and something deeper: hope. He spotted her from across the room, mid-conversation with a group of investors. His voice faltered. His posture stiffened. The mask he wore, the confident billionaire everyone admired, cracked the moment their eyes locked. Ember froze. Her heart leapt, then dropped. She turned, walked toward the exit, tray trembling slightly in her hand. But Sawyer wasn't about to let her vanish again. "Ember!" he called, weaving through the crowd. She quickened her pace, cutting behind a curtain partition near the staff area, heart racing. He found her there, near the service elevator, leaning against the wall, eyes burning. "You don't get to say my name like that," she said, voice low. "Not after ghosting me like I never mattered." "I know," Sawyer breathed, stepping closer. "And I'm sorry. I've played this moment in my head 1,000 times. I left that morning because I was scared. But not of you. Of what I felt with you." Ember looked away, jaw tight. "You disappeared, Sawyer, like it meant nothing." "It meant everything," he said, voice shaking. "That night, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. About you." Silence stretched between them like a tightrope. She finally met his gaze. "Why now?" "Because fate clearly doesn't want us apart," he whispered, "and I'm done pretending I don't care." His words cracked something inside her. Against every instinct telling her to walk away, her heart betrayed her. It ached for him, for the truth in his voice, for the sincerity in his eyes. Still, she hesitated. "I don't trust easily, Sawyer." "Then let me earn it." Ember didn't nod, but she didn't walk away either. And that was enough. For now. Later that night, Sawyer asked her to have coffee after her shift. Somewhere private, somewhere quiet. No suits, no cameras. Just them. They talked. Really talked. He told her about Clara, his ex-fiancée who'd used him for fame, leaked private photos and shattered what was left of his trust. Ember shared her past too, her struggles, her father's death, the years she spent fighting to survive in a city that chewed girls like her alive. Walls began to fall, but neither of them noticed the eyes watching them from across the cafe parking lot. Clara Wynne, Sawyer's ex, sat in a black car, lipstick as red as vengeance, fingernails tapping the steering wheel like a ticking clock. She recognized the girl instantly, the same one from months ago, the waitress he disappeared for, the reason he'd turned down her offers to reconnect. Her jaw clenched. If Sawyer thought he could replace her with this, he was more naive than she remembered. Clara didn't believe in fate. She believed in control, in leverage, in payback. And Ember Collins? She was about to become collateral damage. For a while, it was everything Ember never thought she could have. Long walks under city lights that glowed like stars, dinners on penthouse balconies with string lights overhead, and jazz playing softly in the background. Conversations that unraveled their souls layer by layer. Sawyer listening with a tenderness that made Ember forget the world had ever been cruel. She'd catch him staring at her sometimes, as if he still couldn't believe she was real. "You look at me like I'm magic," she whispered once. "That's because you are," Sawyer replied, brushing his fingers through her soft waves as she blushed. Ember had always felt like a girl fighting the storm. Now she finally felt like the eye of it. But perfect things don't last long. Not when Jessa Whitmore returned. She was the kind of woman who didn't walk. She glided like royalty, elegant, poised, and heartless. The woman who once claimed Sawyer's heart only to betray it. And now, she wanted it back. She showed up at his office unannounced, her smile tight. "Sawyer," she purred, stepping inside like she still owned the air he breathed. "I heard you're dating someone." "Surprising." Sawyer's jaw clenched. "Leave her out of this." "Oh, I plan to," Jessa replied smoothly, brushing imaginary lint off her coat. "Once she's out of your life." The threat hung like smoke in the air. At first, Ember didn't notice anything off. But slowly, strange things began happening. Her phone buzzed with cruel messages from unknown numbers, accusations she was a gold digger. Her photos were taken from her social media and edited into vile posts. One account claimed she'd stolen from an elderly client. Another falsely alleged she'd been fired for lying about her resume. One by one, Ember's jobs disappeared. Sorry, her supervisor mumbled on the phone, but our board saw the headlines. We can't risk the reputation hit. What headlines? Ember asked, confused. She Googled her name. There it was. Local waitress accused of scamming tech investors. A fake article with stock photos and fabricated quotes. Tears welled in her eyes. She ran to Sawyer's place, clutching her phone like it was a bomb. Sawyer read the articles, anger flashing in his blue eyes. Jessa, he muttered. You think she's behind this? Ember asked, voice trembling. She's done worse, he said darkly. But we can't prove it? Sawyer shook his head, frustration painting his features. Not yet. She's smart. She's covering her tracks. Ember stared at the screen. I'm losing everything. My income. My peace. My identity. Sawyer stepped forward, cupping her cheeks. You're not losing me. And yet, in the quiet corners of her heart, doubt slithered in. Was this what life with him would be? Constant attacks? A war she didn't ask for? Ember had always fought alone. She wasn't used to having someone shield her, but she wasn't sure she could survive this battlefield, especially one she couldn't see. That night, as Sawyer held her close, her thoughts wouldn't stop spinning. He whispered promises. She tried to believe them, but her world, once simple and small, was now entangled in a life of influence, jealousy, and power. Love was no longer just love. It was survival, and she wasn't sure if her heart would make it out alive. Ember wasn't the kind of woman who let things go easily. She couldn't, not after everything that had happened. Sawyer was the man who had shown her a world she never thought she could belong to, a world filled with tender words, unexpected warmth, and a love that felt too good to be true. But now that same love felt like a dangerous game, one that was slowly breaking her. The relentless rumors, the lies, the cruelty she'd faced because of Jessa's twisted jealousy. Ember had tried to ignore it. She told herself it was a part of the game when you loved a man like Sawyer. A man who had everything. A man with a past filled with dangerous people. But something in her had snapped. She needed answers. Closure. So she did something reckless. Ember found herself standing at the entrance of Sawyer's sleek apartment building, determined to confront Jessa Whitmore head-on. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It wasn't even about clearing her name. It was about dignity. She'd had enough of feeling like a pawn in a game she never agreed to play. When Jessa answered the door, there was no smile. Only that cold, calculating look Ember had come to expect. She was standing tall, looking as if she had already won the battle. I'm here to talk, Ember said, forcing her voice steady. Jessa looked at her with an unreadable expression. You should leave. But Ember pushed past her, marching into the apartment without permission. I want the truth, Ember said, eyes blazing. Did you do this? Jessa didn't flinch. She didn't need to. She gestured toward the sleek, polished table. Truth? I've got something better. Ember followed her gaze. The moment her eyes landed on the recording device, her heart skipped a beat. You think you're the only one who can fight dirty? Jessa said, smirking as she clicked a button on the device. The sound of Sawyer's voice filled the room. It was unmistakable. His voice. Ember meant nothing. She's just a distraction. A girl who doesn't belong in my world. Ember's world tilted. Her chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself, the air rushing out of her lungs in sharp gasps. Her knees gave way, and she stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table for support. No, she whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. Did you think I'd just let him go? Jessa's voice was low, venomous. He was mine, and now so are you. My pawn. The recording kept playing, repeating those words over and over again. Every syllable pierced Ember's heart like 1,000 daggers. No, she whispered again, more desperately this time. But the truth was clear, her truth, and it was a lie. She was nothing. She had been nothing to him. Ember turned and bolted from the apartment, running out into the cold night air, as if the wind could blow away the pain tearing through her chest. She didn't care where she went, only that she had to escape. Sawyer had betrayed her. He had said it. She didn't know how long she walked or where she was headed. But eventually, Ember found herself standing at the doorstep of her childhood home. Home. The place she had left so many years ago. The place she thought she'd never have to return to. But in that moment, with the recording still echoing in her mind, it felt like the only place where she could breathe. Her mother, worried but understanding, wrapped her arms around her. But Ember was numb. She didn't want comfort. She didn't want understanding. She wanted the truth. The truth that was now impossible to find. Sawyer's name felt like a foreign language on her lips. She couldn't even say it without the pain rising up in her throat. So, she blocked him. On every platform, every message, every phone call. She disappeared. For the first time in her life, Ember wanted to hide from the world that had once promised her everything. Meanwhile, across the city, Sawyer was suffocating under the weight of the betrayal. He'd heard the recording. It was his voice unmistakably. But something didn't feel right. The tone was cold, calculating, not him. He grabbed his phone, urgently dialing her number. No answer. His heart pounded as he tried again and again. "Ember, please," he whispered into the dead line. "I didn't say that. I swear to God, I didn't say that. It's a lie. You have to believe me." But she was gone, disappeared without a trace, and the silence in his apartment felt louder than the noise in his head. The guilt slammed him like a freight train. He wasn't just losing her, he had driven her away. The search for Ember had consumed Sawyer. Every minute of his days was spent in a state of chaos, torn between guilt and determination. Every time he walked into his sleek, empty apartment, he could feel her absence, a wound that bled without ever healing. He had tried everything to reach her, but the lines of communication were dead. She was gone, and no amount of apologies, pleading, or evidence could bring her back into his life. But fate had other plans. One afternoon, when he least expected it, his phone buzzed with a single, cryptic message. "I'm working at the Old Pages bookstore. I'll be here all week. Don't bother me if you're not serious." It was a message sent from Ember, short and blunt, but it was enough to fuel the fire of hope that had been smoldering inside him for weeks. Sawyer stood at the door of the bookstore cafe, the faint smell of old books and freshly brewed coffee drifting into the air. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation he knew was coming. This was it. There was no running now, no excuses. Inside, the warmth of the cafe wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. Soft music played in the background, but all he could hear was the frantic beating of his own heart. And there she was, Ember. Her golden hair, once shining like a halo, now fell in soft waves around her face. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her gaze lost in the pages of a book. But there was a softness to her, an aura of calmness he hadn't seen before. But her eyes, they had the same pain he had seen in them the night she left, that same brokenness. He felt it in the way she stood, in the way she held herself. She had moved on, but a piece of her was still shattered. He had broken her. For a moment, he just stood there watching her, feeling the weight of his mistakes. She didn't notice him at first, but when she finally did, her face fell, and the air between them thickened. "Sawyer," she said quietly, not meeting his gaze. "What are you doing here?" The words hit him like a punch to the gut. The calmness in her voice, the way she avoided his eyes. It was like she had closed herself off, building walls he couldn't see but could feel. "I came to find you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Ember, I need you to hear me out." She sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "I've heard enough, Sawyer. I know what you said. I know what you did." He shook his head urgently. "No, you don't. You don't know the truth. Please, just let me explain." Ember's gaze flickered to his, and for a brief moment, he saw the flicker of the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman who had once trusted him with her heart. But that spark quickly disappeared, replaced by coldness. "Explain?" she asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "What can you explain, Sawyer? You lied to me. You made me believe I was nothing." The words stung, but he didn't flinch. He couldn't. "I never said that," he pleaded, stepping closer. "That recording, it wasn't real. Someone edited it. It was a lie. I would never say those things about you. You meant everything to me." Her eyes narrowed, disbelief painted on her face. And you expect me to believe that? After everything that happened? After you let me walk away without even trying to stop me? I did try, Sawyer said, his voice cracking with emotion. I've been trying every day since that moment. I searched for you. I sent messages. I left you voicemail after voicemail. But you were gone, and I was left to drown in my own guilt. Ember, He broke off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I didn't want to lose you, but I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you, but by not fighting for you, I did the worst thing possible. I let you believe I didn't care. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, trying to hold herself together. I couldn't stay in that world anymore, Sawyer. I couldn't live in a place where love is always a game, where it's just about winning and losing. Sawyer's heart cracked. I don't want to play games with you. I never did. I wanted to be with you, for real. I've never met anyone like you, Ember. You showed me what it was like to truly be alive, to feel something other than the weight of the world I carry. And when I lost you, I lost myself. Ember swallowed hard, her chest rising and falling with the weight of his words. You've hurt me more than anyone. I trusted you, Sawyer. I gave you everything. And you let me walk away thinking I was nothing. I know, I know, and I'll regret it every day for the rest of my life. His voice softened. But I'm asking you now, from the bottom of my heart, please don't let that be the last thing between us. You mean more to me than I can even say. You're not just a part of my past. You're my future. You always have been. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotions. Sawyer could see the battle waging in her eyes, whether to trust him again, whether to open her heart to him after everything that had happened. I don't know if I can forgive you, Ember whispered, her voice cracking. But what if I'm not the only one who needs forgiveness? Sawyer reached for her hand gently, holding it between his palms. His touch was warm, steady. Then let's forgive each other, together, and move forward, because I can't live with the idea that I let you slip away. Tears spilled from Ember's eyes as she finally let herself fall into his arms. Sawyer, I never stopped loving you, even when I hated you. I couldn't stop. I never stopped loving you either, he murmured into her hair, and I never will. Sawyer could no longer pretend. The city, with its cold, polished skyscrapers and corporate battles, had become a prison, a reminder of everything he had once lost. So he left. He left behind the life of luxury, the endless meetings, and the rigid expectations of his old world. He moved to Ember's lake town, where the air was fresh, and the pace of life was slower, more real. The quiet of the town was a balm to his soul. He bought a charming house on the edge of the lake, where the sun rose over the water every morning in a perfect reflection. It wasn't the most extravagant house, but it was his, and it was a place he could finally call home. For the first time in his life, Sawyer woke up early to watch the sun rise over the lake, feeling peace in the rhythm of everyday moments. Gone were the boardrooms and fancy dinners. Instead, there were slow mornings spent over coffee, brunch dates with Ember, and evenings filled with poetry readings that made his heart swell with a kind of love he had never known. Ember, too, had changed. The weight of the world seemed lighter on her shoulders as she continued to work at the cafe, where the smell of fresh coffee and the rustle of book pages became a constant comfort. They were no longer two people from different worlds. They had become something more, something better. Together, they were building a life that felt right, one step at a time. One afternoon, as they sat together in the cafe, a quiet peace between them, Sawyer knew what he had to do. He had waited long enough. He couldn't wait for a perfect moment. He had already learned that life didn't give you perfect. It gave you real. With a gentle smile, Sawyer stood and moved toward the counter, where a simple silver ring sat in a small velvet box. He returned to Ember's side, his heart racing in a way he had never felt before. Ember, he whispered, taking her hand in his. You changed my life from the moment I saw you. I never knew love could be like this. I never knew I could be the man I am because of you. Her eyes were wide, her breath shallow, but she didn't pull away. I know I've made mistakes. I've hurt you, but I've learned. I've learned how to love you, how to put you first, how to trust you and let go of my fears. The room seemed to disappear as he kneeled, the world suddenly shrinking into just the two of them. Will you marry me, Ember Collins? Not because of what I have, but because of who I am, and because of what we are together. Ember's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, the truth of their journey written in every line of her face. She had been through so much, but the man before her now was different from the one who had first walked into her life. This was the man who had learned to love, truly and deeply. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. Yes, I will. It wasn't a decision made for the glimmer of wealth or the promise of an easy life. It was a decision made out of the depth of their love, built on trust, vulnerability, and healing. Sawyer had finally let down his walls, walls that had once kept him from feeling anything real. And together they began to build a life rooted not in money, but in love. Not in fear, but in trust. Sawyer's world had been turned upside down when he met Ember. But that night, the night they first shared, wasn't an accident. It had been the beginning of something so much bigger than either of them had imagined. It was the beginning of a love that would last forever. Their love wasn't perfect. It wasn't without its struggles and doubts, but it was real, and that was enough. Ember's heart was home, and Sawyer had finally found his peace.